Hi guys, it is me, Kristen Bean. I'm here continuing on with the EXP Expo 2022, the one with all the twos. Today I'm going to be interviewing my boss at Space Cadets Collection, Miss Jen King. I came up with the idea for this interview because we work together a ton of hours every week, but I don't ever really get to ask her just questions about how she started in the comic industry and, how all of this started. So that's what we're going to get into today. Hi, Miss Jen.
Wow. We have similarly comfortable couches we're sitting upon.
I know. I always feel like I'm in Wayne's World whenever I do interviews and stuff on couches. So that's what we can pretend.
Absolutely. I'm in my TV room.
Mhm. I'm in my temporary living room, so very cozy. Alrighty. So like I said, we work together so much, but I don't ever really get a chance to sit down and talk to you because we end up talking about things like, where is this comic book? We're out of nickels. Uh-oh. So I definitely, one thing that I've always wanted to ask you is what comic book really that you read and really just made you think this is something that's going to be in the rest of my life? Like, did you have that comic?
I don't know if it was a single one, because what really brought me into comic books to really love them wasn't my first comic books at all. When I started reading Chris Claremont's X-Men, it was everything that I wanted out of a book. I had always been reading novels. I was one of those people that just always had a book in my hand. If you didn't know where I was probably sitting in a corner and crisscross applesauce reading away as a kid. I would get my my full body's weight full of books from the library every time we went. So I was always looking for character driven work. So I didn't know that comic books could be that until I just came across pure 90s X-Men goodness, some major big story names with characters that I learned to love and hate. Like most people my age that grew up watching especially the 90s X-Men cartoon, many have a great love of Logan Wolverine, and for his great love affair with Jean, and have an equal hate of Scott Summers' Cyclops because he's the thing that's in between them. So, who thought there'd be a big romance that you cared anything about in comic books? But it gave us all that, and then there was it felt like there were true stakes for the characters, and it mattered to them if something bad went on for each other. It wasn't just my teammate's dead, sad face.
So you sort of found depth in there that you weren't expecting.
Yes, absolutely. And the art was also wonderful. Although I still to this day I appreciate comic book art. I can definitely tell you that there are books that appeal to me and don't in art style, but I forgive art in a comic book as long as the stories drive forward. They figures, honestly, as long as the writing's on point. So maybe I'm more of a writer follower than an artist follower for the medium. It's weird, right? Because it is a visual medium.
Well, and you say you're more of a writer follower, but I mean you've written comic books yourself. What was the first comic that you wrote?
So I did a little bit of work for a bunch of friends that were doing small form faith-based books. But my first real I'm doing my own stuff was a book called The Eighth Beast. It came out in 1995, I believe. We got finished with the first one. And that was the time when, for Don and for the collectible world in general, black and white comics were where it was, because the era of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles breaking out big time and being really important, and a bunch of other cool black and white stuff. So you could really make it as a super indie creator creating books that were all in black and white, except for color cover usually. But so that was I got together with local artists, a really wonderful penciler named Bobby Diaz, and a wonderful inker named Shannon Gallant. And we used to sit in my first comic book store that I opened when I was 25, and I would fuss out a chapter and then hand the pages off to Bobby, and he would sit at the desk across from Shannon. They had it so that it was like one of those A-frame double person desks where one each other, and they would just work at the back of the comic book store. And so it was a kind of a different thing where like now if you're working with somebody, sometimes you're collaborating with people that are even on the other side of the world, so you just do like a Zoom call or whatever. But back then it was kind of awesome because you just kind of like, they would say, "Hey, Miss Jen, I understand what's going on." Walk back and explain to them what you were wanting. And now where I'm going to tell you, it was actually to the book's detriment, because because I could be there and explain it to people, and I was primarily selling it to the people that were in the store. There were a lot of things that I left out of the book that the book needed for a much wider audience. People that came into my store knew that this page is definitely what happens when this guy gets knocked out, and you're seeing kind of a vision that he's having, or this happens 3 years before this other part. Because I would say, well, what the needed as a writer was to have the the easy little block at the top 6 months ago. So in hindsight, looking back at it, the writing part was great, except for those kind of direction things that were great if you were living in the same small town with me. Someone else probably was like, that would have been helpful to know.
Oh my goodness. And that store, you said that was your first one. What was the name of that store? Where was it?
That was in Midland, Texas, and it was called Planet X. Okay. And believe it or not, some of the kids that used to hang in the store, who they were like 3, I think, that I used to regularly drive to their house on Sunday morning to go up for church. Their parents were cool from going with us. I think mostly they liked the companionship, and they liked that we took them out to lunch afterwards. So, but at least one of those kids I'm still in contact with, and he's actually writing books himself now. He's working on first work now. So it's kind of to talk to them as they're all grown up now.
Yeah. And I mean, LCSs are so important, like the little local, because that's really the way people get into comics. Most people, they have a good little local comic shop, and that's the gateway, So that first shop, how long did you have that one open?
Okay, so I opened that one in 95, and then we sold it in 97. It wasn't because of anything that was going on wrong with the store. It was actually being very successful. But my husband, Mike, had a dream of being able to go off to business school, and he applied and gotten accepted into Northwestern School of Business catalog. But I would never say that because people think we went to the serial school. So we sold it to one of our customers and moved away to Chicago for a couple of years. So it was one of those things, like, it was a really awesome 2 years. And after that, I pretty much rotated to what was very early eBay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a thing until, or it wasn't the thing it is now when it first in 1999. So yeah, it was a lot of fun being in Midland, because Midland was kind of, I don't know if you've ever been there, it's the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
5 hours from anywhere, which is this is so funny to say. But those were the years when Dallas Fantasy was still going on, so we would drive to Dallas, do that show, and it was a really top show when it was still, and that was when Rob Liefeld was brand new and coming up in the industry, and James O'Barr was having his heyday. Not that he's not, just that he was at his top of his game when the Pro came out in '95.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the difficulties with opening a store in 1995 were giant, in that the industry was experiencing a downturn when you open a store.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big distribution wars going on, in which by the end of '95, it was Diamond Capital,
Mm-hmm.
the two big ones, Diamond 8 Capital, or at least put it out of business. And then Marble tried its hand at distribution and made Heroes World. And then in '96, Marble declared bankruptcy. A lot of people remember that, but Marble was in bankruptcy at one point. Could have bought it as a penny stock if you'd like.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, there was a UPS strike. So for a little while, we had to drive to the airport to get our comic books. And there was a near collapse of the industry from speculation. So, so as I'm sure you've heard me say, I tell people, if you could survive the year 1996 comic books as a store, you probably can survive just about it. So,
yeah. That's wild. And so you survived it, got to 1997, and then kind of left and took a break. When you took that break, like, did you know you were going to be back with a new store, or did you think, I'm going to just move on?
Oh, no. It's one of those things that I really, really didn't want to stop what I had started, but I also knew the opportunity it was being given to us, because it's a really tough school to get into, that I knew it was going to come around again. So it was something I knew that we needed to do at the point of life we're in. So we're still really those kinds of crazinesses. So I never regretted that to let that store go. It taught me to know to then open the store that I have now. So
yeah. And what year did you open Space Cadets?
In 2010. Okay. It's kind of an interesting story why it took us so long, why it took us until then to open it. I had a family between my two boys that they were 3 years apart.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I got them to an age where they didn't feel abandoned or dislike the fact that we had a family business, because it takes a lot of time and focus. And didn't want them to see it as so I waited until it was 2010, so and 7, so it's about the time to be able to do it. And we actually would have done it a little sooner, but my sweet husband said you have to come up with a business partner. Yeah. And I looked and looked and looked and looked and looked so hard to find something that matched my business style, and I just could not find the person. So I finally asked my husband, I said, what's the difference between me getting a business and me hiring somebody for the store? He was like, no. So I was like, okay, well then, I think that's the way I'm going to go until, if I found a business partner, I would have totally taken them on. But
Yeah. And what was, because I know that your first time in was the 90s, and the industry was really volatile. What did the industry look like in 2010 when you were coming back? Like, was it calmer? Was it having its own crisis then?
Actually, I think 2010 was a really wonderful time. I think Pokemon was just kind of coming back a little bit because it had had a little quiet time middle. So it was starting to happen today, which was really important to the beginning of our store, because we had what was then and then for the next 5 years or more the biggest Pokemon League. It was all to the credit of Mike Cook, who was the league leader. Really took care of all the kids and the families and made sure that they were good sportsmen. Enjoyed the game. It was amazing. I was really sad when he retired out, but then he had any real reason to, because his son had already gone off to college and was not a Pokemon player anymore. So he was just doing it out of the kindness of his art.
Yeah.
But I think that comic books were in a good place. I think the one difference that I did not expect is when I sold my store in the 90s, Marvel was king. You could sell tons of Marvel. And when I made my very first order, I made a huge Marvel order and almost no order. And I did not know at that time, but I think that was when New 52 had just come out.
Oh, wow.
Was king. And Marvel was not bad. This was not in the place it was in the 90s, when people would come in and buy 5 copies of this and 6 copies of that. So that was the big difference. It was just a matter of time of figuring out ordering. So that was a hiccup that I expect.
And of course, now the store supports tons of indie label, indie publishers, independent artists. And that was going to be my next question was, is that something that you started early in your old store, or is that something you kind of got into as you've gone through the years?
So my push has always been for indies, maybe a little bit because I was an indie in my first store, as I saw how hard that was. But even back then, we had the 2 years that we were there, we had 2 Planet Comic Cons, in which our landlord was super sweet, kind of like our landlord is now. But I would ask them if I could use space in the center I was in then to have a convention. And I can remember asking them the first time and say, how much money would it be to rent this other space for the weekend? And Jen, just leave it nice and don't mess it up. And it was the best giant space I've ever rented for no money. But it allowed me to have to invite a whole bunch of people, and they were all independent people. So what some people know in the industry is there's a sweet guy who has a booth at a lot of the big cons named Bob the Artist. He probably has the tallest booth of anyone. But he started out writing a comic book called Template, and he was one of our very first guests. And he was have people to the store all the time. You might know Patrick Scott that does Archangels, or did Archangels. He's a friend of the store now. But I met him back then, and we had him at the store to sign all the time. There's a lot of early creators that came to the shop because they would have to come from down, of course, which is a long drive, but they still make it. Come out and see us. The second year we did Planet Comic Con, it was huge. We had to use the largest space in our center that was empty.
And I don't know, I guess what was like the first really big person that you remember having as a guest come by that you were just like, was there anybody who you've just been like, oh my goodness, they're coming here? Or you seem like you might have always played it cool and been like, of course you're coming here.
I don't know that I ever had anyone really giant come to the store.
Mm-hmm.
Not because Midland really is like a trek to the middle of nowhere. You have to like have family there or something to make it worthwhile coming. So I would usually just go to wherever they were. I usually just I mostly had independent. Oh, here's the deal. I forgot to tell you what my deal always was with independent creators to come to the. Here's what I used to ask them. I say like, all right, can you come and sign at the store? You can sign all weekend long, and you get to keep whatever money you make. And you get to, I'll take you out to food because I still do that part. But then you can sleep on my couch.
That's incredible. I mean, especially for independent artists, that's nice.
And for the both conventions that we put on, I think everyone stayed at the house and they just slept on wherever they could top a squash.
Yeah.
But free lodging is prime.
Yeah. And what about at Space Cadets though? Because I know you've had some big people come to Space Cadets over the years.
Oh, I have. Okay, so by weird happenstance, this is through a friend of mine who does costume work. My second passion is doing costuming. She was doing costume work for this female friend of hers that I didn't know directly, but this female friend was dating someone famous, and it was like one of those things you're like, okay. But here's the crazy story. So we all met up at San Diego Comic-Con. Mike, my husband, has no ability to recognize famous people. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's the best cool cat ever, right? Because he doesn't. He can be talking to him all day long and not really know who he's talking to. But so he's standing outside in the hallway at San Diego Comic-Con talking to a dude while he's just like, he looks like the guy's just like hanging out waiting for his girlfriend who is dressing up and getting pictures with everybody, right? So Mike's just talking to him like he's just some other guy, like another husband or boyfriend, because he's used to being the other guy, the guy that's like, I'm the person that's dressed up, and he's standing there making sure he's hydrated, right? So they talked all day, and then we got invited to go to dinner with them. So we show up, and we have this whole long talk at dinner, and I can tell this fellow, I know who he is. He's trying to see if Mike knows who he is. He's been talking to him all day long. He's never. And we leave the restaurant. I was like, Mike, do you even know who you were talking to all day long? He's like, I don't know that. So this may not be as famous to everybody else as it because he is me, but I watched the movie Stargate. I don't know how many times, hundreds of times. Watched Stargate.
Yeah.
And the Alexis Cruz is the guy who plays Skara, who's the main kid that is in the, like, when they get to the plant where this is. He's the one that like befriends them and being like the hero of the show. Then he went on to play the same role in SG-1. But Cruz became friends with us. And so much so he came to the store. He did a signing at the store. He slept on my couch. So there's those weirdnesses that you're just like, okay, I think that famous people are just normal people. They're just cool. We had, I'm going to be bad and not be able to remember his actual name. I think his last name is Moody. The guy who played Admiral Piet in Star Wars has come to the store. Aaron Douglas, who plays Captain Tyrrell in Battlestar Galactica, has been to the store. I swear there's going to be so many that I'm just going to regret not remembering. And we have even more. We've got a bunch of people that are lined up to come, but because of COVID, it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. So hopefully soon those will happen.
Yeah, I know. And how, I mean, and I guess this is kind of jumping forward, but I mean, you know, throughout COVID and everything, how do you think that it's going to change how comic stores operate in the future, or do you think that things will kind of go back?
I think there's some things that are I'm hoping don't ever change.
Mhm.
We, for a long time in the industry, I know in '96 when we got down just to one distributor,
Mhm.
that seemed fine until we found ourselves in situations like with when we had Harvey or
Mhm.
any other giant weather problem.
Mhm.
And distributor with one location, if something goes wrong, the whole country has no access to things. And I've been saying for a long time, we either need a bunch more locations for that one distributor, which they used to have, or we needed to definitely have multiple distributors so that we had options for if we needed to get them from somewhere else. I tend to be a loyalist, so I don't like to leave someone that's been giving me good service. So that's why we're still hanging with the Jeppies and Diamond.
Mhm.
But I think that's one of the big changes that I don't think is going to go back.
Mhm.
And then I don't know, there's a lot of other things that people have done, just kind of like being smart about how to spend their money and safety things. I think a lot of people are going to continue to try to be safe health wise. And I don't know. I think that there's some things that have changed, like publishers have now, it used to be publishers were scared to sell directly to stores.
Mhm.
And now they do that. And they're also doing crazy things like having their own whatnots and selling directly during live sales. So there's a lot of things that, because we figured out how to survive in the pandemic age, I don't know that those things will disappear once we don't have that squeeze anymore. Because I think it's awesome, because I know they're reaching different people than they would have if they were only doing it the distribution model, which is good for the whole industry. So
Yeah. Do you feel like there is anything else that the comic industry can kind of do to kind of reach more people? Like, I don't know if there's anything you've done, like owning a store for this long, to help, because I know you're always helping like the individual people that come in, but do you feel like there's anything we could do to just like get more comics to more people?
well, that's another thing that's the thing that's been bad, that's changed, that I want to change back so desperately, is before we had, you know, like people being careful and not doing big events, there were a lot more things that brought families together. Like schools had a lot more like year-end festivals and fundraisers and book fairs and those kinds of things. And all of those things we would go out to the community and go participate in, so we could reach people that would like comic books that hadn't been exposed to them before.
Mhm.
And we haven't had those in so long. I'm worried that when we come back, the people will forget that we had them.
Yeah. If you hadn't gone the route, if somebody had come to you and said, you cannot own a comic book store, you are banned, what would you be doing instead?
I'd probably still be doing retail.
Mm-hmm.
I trained to be a police officer, and I had a dream of becoming an FBI agent. But I realized that probably I like watching about doing it more than I would actually doing the actual thing, because it's actually very dangerous and it puts a lot of stress on your home life. And I watch a lot of people that that stayed in the police force, how much they have to just kind of like, they become very insular.
Mm-hmm.
They only have friends that are police officers because no one else really understands this pressures that they go through all the time. They see themselves, they go into being a police officer to be a hero, and being a police officer that people look at as and that's gotta be hard on someone's, you just wanted to be someone's hero. Everyone's you're giving me
Is that kind of like, is that hero narrative kind of what connects like you wanting to be a police officer and you loving comic books?
I haven't really ever thought about that, but maybe that aspect of it appeals to me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that my favorite character is,
Mm-hmm.
he always falls on the side of the law because he does, but because he always tries to do what's right. Feels to me that I think there really can be people in the world that really do try. They might fail. We're all humans and we do dumb stuff.
Yeah.
But to have that as an ideal, I think we don't have to have superpowers to get there. And I also love his characters because you look as before he got the super serum, he really wanted to do whatever it took, even as a weakling, to serve and the right stuff. And I just like a lot as a character.
What is your what's your favorite like comic book story arc that you've read?
I've got a bunch that I really love, but the one that I had the most fun with back in the original store was there was a storyline that they did called Onslaught, and it was when you talk about like water cooler talk, or like when we like right now when we binge shows like Loki and that kind of stuff, when everyone wants to talk every week, it was exactly that for the comic shop. I don't think there's been another one like that in a long time, where every week people came and wanted to talk about what in the world was going on and who could Onslaught be, what was the history behind it. It really drew it out, and the twist at the end made me really good because I had figured it out. And maybe everybody else did too, but no one the shot that I was like, reached to on the regular, not who I thought it was. I could be right.
And that was, I guess I don't remember ever having, but also I am a person who reads a lot of indies. I don't remember at any point having like one story just overtake, everyone's reading it, everyone's excited. You said, if you ever seen that happen again since then?
I don't think I have. I kind of expected that to happen. Well, okay, no, there was one. Probably within the time that the store's been open, the Secret Emperor storyline probably equally as it's very polarizing too, because there were a lot of people that hadn't been reading the books, that their first experience with it was Captain America #1, where he says Hell Hydra on the last page, and people lost their ever-loving mind and gave death threats to Nick Spencer, who wrote the book.
Oh man!
And that one was the first time that. Marvel was super awesome, and when they told me where they were headed with the story, they didn't tell me what the what was going to be the end arc for it, but they were saying that something big was coming, and that Hydra was going to take over, and it was called the Hydra. And I asked Marvel for something I thought they would never ever give us, and I asked them, please allow me to take the Hydra changeover logo, because it changed a little bit over time to being full Hydra. I take that and put it as part of my store logo, and have my store logo be taken over by the Hydra logo also.
Oh my goodness.
And permission to do that for all the other stores. And we got permission to do it. So somewhere out there is a full Hydra takeover of the Space Cadets logo, because it's a nice round logo, the Hydra. It fits right in our where the rocket is.
Oh, that's wonderful. You've got to find a picture of that and show that to me sometime, because
absolutely.
Let's see. I know I can't ask you what your favorite comic book character is, because I know that one. I know that one. We already talked about that one. I guess what would be advice that you would give to someone who says, I want to open a comic book store?
Oh, this is a good one. I actually used to do panels about this. Usually what I would, the way I start those panels at conventions, this is pretty fun. So it's the way that Tim Robbins tells you to, which is to ask a question.
Yeah.
Who in this room is here because you want to open a comic book store, which is everyone, because the name of the panel is I want to open a comic book store right now. Everyone raises their hand. So they're into the message, which is awesome. But and I would say, all right, how many of you have written a business plan? And like, I used to tell people, I said, there'd be like one person that would tentatively hold up their hand. You're lying. You don't have a business plan. You thought about making a business plan, but you don't have a plan. Because what a lot of people do that's wrong when they want to open a comic book store is they've got all the energy, the gumption, maybe the money, the excitement, the willpower to do the hours, all those things, but they don't have a bit of business sense. You really have to have business sense to run a shop, just like any other business there is. You can't run it the way that a lot of people envision a comic book store, which is open the doors with lots of comic books, and then people are going to come in, and while I'm reading comic books, we're going to talk about comic books, and then money's going to go in the till, and I'll buy more comic books. Well, what no one thinks about is, how are you going to pay for the water and your security system? And who's going to put all of those comics in bags and boards if you're going to do that? And who's going to do the inventory? And how are you going to keep track of what your profits and losses are? And how are you going to know when you should stop carrying the book because buying that one off the rack?
Yeah.
Your turn rates. Everyone kind of goes blank. Rates. Oh no. I learned turn rates from Brian Hibbs, who's a magical, awesome, really awesome business person who runs a really cool, I think he's got one store now in the San Francisco area. It's called Comics Experience, believe it or not, with an X.
Yeah.
He pays attention to his numbers very carefully. Of course, he also is in a market where their minimum wage is super high and their rent is low. So this really, my advice is to figure out a budget, always put in a budget and advertising, marketing part, and always spend it. No matter if it feels like you're doing really great and you don't need to do it, everybody knows who you are. Always spend your advertising budget on something. It'd be the same thing. Just spend. And then you just talk to as many retailers as you can. To make friendships with them, and be in the peer groups with them. It'll save you a lot of heartache because there's a lot of people out there that are more than willing to share knowledge for how to do retail, which is kind of different than a lot of other retails. I don't know if there's a lot of like big Facebook retailer groups for other things than comics, but maybe I'm wrong.
And what about your other sort of experience with comics, which is writing comics? How is that easier to go into, or how would somebody go about getting into writing a comic?
Okay, so this is one of those realms where this is a creativity response. If you're gonna go into writing, art, theater, or anything like that, the key is to do it and then do it some more, and then when you're on your downtime, do it. So that's what all the writers in the world would give you as advice for: get up in the morning and write, go to bed, write some more, and then make connections with other writers. So, and that's what worked for me. I didn't get a publisher to publish me. I formed my own publishing company, which is as simple as like making up a name and putting it on your book. Ours was Looking Glass Comics.
Nice.
And you just gotta read as much as you can. There's some really good books out there. Dirk Manning has one that is a really good book about writing, called Right or Wrong. And I think he's got an edited version he's working on now. Look at the format for how to write. Comic book script writing is awful a lot like writing movie script. I write mine exactly the same. I know there's people that have different formats that they use. Mine seem to be understandable. And just read a lot of books to help you understand. You can help. It'll help you avoid things that I see people that are new to comic book writing. They'll give direction for something that's supposed to be drawn on the page, and then in the narration or comment, they will also say the same thing. So, it's a big no to both have something on the page and then have to say something about it that people can just with their eyes. Like, oh, the box is opening, when clearly the box is opening in front of you, is making the reader feel dumb. Or that makes the reader feel like you're dumb. The box, okay, I can see the box is opening. And then another thing you'll see a lot in really great writing is if you feel like the smartest person in the room when you're reading a comic book, then the writer's doing the right thing, where they've given you just enough hints in the writing to make you feel like you know what's coming. And when it does, then you feel justified and happy because you know the thing. That's because they've written it well. You have to have this just right amount of, I'm giving you what you need to know to be able to figure it out, but I'm not saying it outright, so you feel like a dummy.
I'm not going to say favorite because that gets like, but what's a comic book writer that you really have admired and followed for years and years and years, and kind of what do their stories mean to you?
The one that I have never read a book that I didn't like of theirs was Meyer. I message him all the time and tell him, curse you, that you make me cry or give me emotional hit almost every single book I read. Especially in like the Black Hammer world, where he just did May's book. It's like he knows how to get you to a place where you have a lot of emotion about something, make you really feel deeply for what's happening in the book. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? You don't want to feel sad, despair, or regret or loss, but yet that's why we watch movies and TV and read books, is because it's a safe place to feel those things. And he's what I reckon to be the master of that specifically. My opinion.
And I think one thing about his books is, honestly, if I was asked that same question, I would have also said Jeff Lemire, because I absolutely adore his books. But I think the key with him is that he leaves a little bit of hope. May's book has the end of the maze. There's always just that little glimmer in the distance for him. So it's I think that's something special that he does.
Yeah, but it's funny, if I could have like 20 or 30 of my favorite writers and be able to list them that I equally like for different reasons, then I might have to have more than 30, because but for artists, I may have 6 or so that I could tell you from seeing their art. I'd be like, oh, I recognize that as being a specific artist. But like, Cullen Bunn, I know that I'm going to get probably a little bit of uncomfortable horror and amazing story development from him. It doesn't like writes for every company, I think. And I'm never, ever sad at anything I've picked up from him. It was just like, I think you can have many, many multiple. Depends on the day of the week.
I know. That's why I was like, I'm not going to ask the favorite. I'm going to just ask one, because you can't pick a favorite. But so what is an artist that you really admire and you followed for a long time?
This is the hard part. I really like. No, see?
Yeah.
I'm going to come up with one today. that I'm just like, that artist, I am in love with them. Maybe ones that I find that I really love their art style are like Kit Wallace, who does, Good Boy and Warcorns, and he's kind of like a Scotty Young style. I find it so much different than a lot of other artists. And then I could point to a book and say I like that art, but I not be able to tell you who's doing the art in it, which is so sad.
And that's such an interesting thing about comics too, is there's so many ways to engage with them, of like enjoying the writing, enjoying the art, enjoying the collecting of it, which I know that's something which I've always wanted to just ask, is I know that you collect comic books?
Oh. Caught me at my own game. I actually don't. I have a small collection at the house. I think a long box and a short box, but I haven't added to it in 20 years. Is
that your original comic like collection from when you were younger?
No, it's all stuff that in the 90s, when I used to spend a lot more time at most of the conventions, I would walk around in what was like, I think called kind of Artist Alley, and just see what had on their tables, and I'd buy those books because I knew I liked the story, and I just kept those. Some of those people went on to be really big names, and some of them are still just local writers, but I have an emotional connection to that book that's not about the book 100%. It's more about the experience of getting the book from the person that I got it from. And books that I find that are like on the rack books, for comic books, the experience is actually the reading of them. I don't need to keep it forever. I would much rather have it get back on the rack so that another person can have an emotional connection with the book. So I'm probably a weird anomaly in the comic book world that, although I collect original comic art, I'll spend good money on a piece of original comic art for myself. The comic books themselves, I enjoy reading them every week. You know that you hear me talking about them. But I don't necessarily want to hoard them.
Yeah, that is, I don't know. I mean, I've only worked at one comic shop in my life. So you are 100% of my bosses. So right now you are the norm on that. But I was very surprised the first time I heard you reference, oh, I don't collect I'm not buying these, So it's interesting. I'm sure the comment section will probably tell us if that's normal or if that's an anomaly for you to not have a huge hoard at home.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some smart retailers out there that over the years they took home the key books and they're going to retire on that someday. But I wasn't smart enough to do any of that stuff.
Well, you're never going to retire anyway, so you don't need to worry about it, right?
Never.
What is a story? Because I know that you're still writing. You're writing comics. I'm sure have you ever stopped writing or taken a break, or is it just something you constantly do?
My problem is that I've written comic books. I didn't get to finish the first series, which was I'd love to go back to that, actually. I still have so much of that story to tell. I've written partial novels before, but then run out of time to be able to do. That's kind of the story of my life, that I have lots of projects that are great projects that there's other stuff that becomes more important to me. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll get back to that someday. Who knows if I'm really going to go back to do it?
Yeah.
I hope the comic book stuff I get to finish. I hate to leave that story hanging there, but
is there a certain like type of story in your mind that you're like, if you could just like a certain narrative that you want to tell with your stories?
I love to tell tales in which Even though they're not mysteries, the book mysteries, like to present them that way to the reader. I don't give them everything about the character, but I let them know just enough to make them want to know more about them, or how the things that they're going through. Because nothing I ever write is just there for color. It always is important to something later on that happens. So I guess I like writing Easter eggs.
That's wonderful. Do you start writing and know the end then? Like, do you know are you like I know there's a great quote from George R. R. Martin that says that there's two types of writers. There's the gardener and the architect. Are you an architect then?
Okay, so don't tell anybody. The book I'm currently writing, the publisher asked me, have you outlined everything and you know where the story beats are in this book? And I said, yes, I have. But the reality is that I let the book write itself. All I've ever written that was great was because I let it take itself where it was going to go. I know where the main actual story beats are. I know what the big stops are, but I honestly sit down at my computer and start writing, and if that character's little part that I'm talking about is, 3 pages and it becomes 10, then that's the way the book is. I'm just gonna let it go.
So Bean's laptop just died.
Oh no!
So now while I get myself ready to come on camera, because my camera's off.
She's gonna run a power cord, I'm certain of it.
while she's running around trying to get a power cord on, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
You just low-key announced that you're writing a book.
Shh.
I said low-key. Can you tell us genre?
I'll tell you the exact same way I pitched it to the publisher. 6 months from now.
Okay, but is it an action?
Sure.
Is it a suspense? Is it a psychological thriller? Are you writing the Forensic Files?
No, but okay. It might as well be. No, it really does deal with. I don't like writing high fantasy books or books that have are so fantastical that they couldn't happen. My forte is writing things that are just this much above what is actually possible so that it seems probable. Most of the people that read The Eighth Beast told me to stop writing it because it started to freak them out. Because I like to tie things to things that are happening currently and messing with people's heads.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a...
So I pre-apologize.
That's going to be a thing, isn't it? When I read this book from you, I'll be like, why are you doing this to me? Why I got to be like that between us? Is that going to be a thing?
Yep. And if I had my way, I know that for publishers right now, they can't just be like, yeah, sure, I'll do an open order for this universe you want to build that takes a long time to roll out and you want to explore every nook and cranny. I know I can't write Walking Dead, for example. It's just not, with paper shortage and all those kinds of things, it's not a possibility. But for me, I would love just never ending. I'm just going to tease you forever and for all your life. Brain.
All right. Well, now that Bean is back, I'm going to ask one more question, if that's okay with Bean.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is the celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the experience. You're the boss here. So we're forecasting out a year from now. Where would you like to see the experience a year from now?
I honestly would really love to see the industry kind of embracing it and understanding what we're doing, that we really are trying to raise everybody up, writers and creators and publishers, stores, businesses that are related to our industry, movie and TV, and just trying to make a place where people think of, I want to be entertained for a while. I'm thinking about the experience first, or I need to know up-to-date information, or I want to find my favorite comic book. I just want them to think, I want to know that we're on at least people's radars for a place that they're coming first. It's my dream.
Is there anything coming up this year on the experience that you're really excited about?
I'm excited for this year because we get to expand on things we did last year. Largely Kyle, who you just saw pop on.
Yeah.
This experience that we're doing right now is because we decided we would have a big event to launch the network under his guidance. It ended up being a really awesome event, but then we didn't stop. He planned out really amazing other events like Black's Comics Universe, where we lifted up the Black voice of creatives in our industry, led by Amaya Latif. And we've done the Asian American Heritage. That was a really amazing event where we can just continue to focus on our Pride event, where we continue to have those kinds of big events to continue to raise up voices from all nooks and crannies and show that at our hearts we all want the same thing, which is to show our love and passion for comic books. So that's what I'm excited for, getting to expand on the things and having more guests and more eyeballs to watch them.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year. Yeah. All righty. And that is all we have time for right now with this interview. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., we're going to have Henri Kampmann. We're going to have an interview with him. And then at 8 p.m., we're going to have Afua Richardson.
So can I make an announcement on the end of your panel?
Yes.
I'm going to make a big experience announcement because Jen made me sound so good. But the fact of the matter is I couldn't make this announcement if it wasn't for the two people in the room. So Jen and Bean and her gang of crazies from Space Cadets, Saturday at a time to be announced, because I think it's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, but I can't promise that. We will be debuting a show called Space Cadets with a D, an E, and 2 T's, spelled different than Jen's store, but close to the same, featuring Jenna, Bean, and Shanice, who you've met on Miss Jen's live shows and everything else we're doing, that they've been working very hard on for a long time. And it's time we finally are ready to debut it starting this weekend. So without these two, it wouldn't happen. And so we're going to announce it here on this show that it's going to run every week here on The Experience.
I'm still shocked because you say we've been working so hard, but I mean, we've just been recording the conversations. It's me with two of my close friends. We're all good friends, and we're all just get to talk about comic books. So it's been amazing because I get paid for that.
Yeah.
What?
Hey, mad props also for behind the scenes. Jay Burns, who's helping make this happen. This is editing and producing work, so what he has done.
So fun announcement to end the show.
Yeah. All right. Yep. It is going to be lots and lots of fun. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of the EXP Expo 2022 with all the twos.